It's time to get the story behind the story. Interviews with newsmakers, news breakers, and Vermonters making a difference. WCAX presents 802 News with Mark Johnson. Here's Mark.
The 2026 Winter Olympics are about to start and are being held in northern Italy this year. In this edition of 802 News, sponsored by Red Hen Cafe and Bakery, we get a preview of events, including those featuring athletes with ties to Vermont, from journalist Peggy McKay-Shin. She's covered 8 Olympics. The Northeast Kingdom native shares her insights, some great stories, and a few predictions. First this. At Red Hen Baking Company, they believe pure, uncomplicated ingredients in the hands of skilled artisans are the building blocks for great food. They're dedicated to creating the best food from the best ingredients. You'll find an ever-changing lineup of delicious pastries, sandwiches, and soups at their beautiful cafe off Route 2 in Middlesex, just off I-89. Their breads are also available in many other locations. Led by owners Randy George and Eliza Kane, Red Hen Baking Company has been on the leading edge of the local food movement since 1999. Let's just dive in here and talk about some of the real, I think, marquee people. The story about Michaela Schifrin is just phenomenal. And I guess we can claim her as sort of being a Vermonter because she went to Burke Academy. But she is really just extraordinary.
She is extraordinary. We can also claim her because she spent her formative years over the river in Hanover, New Hampshire, training at Storrs Hill in Lebanon. So her dad was working at Dartmouth Hitchcock. So she was in the East Coast for more than just high school. But yeah, she's going into the Olympics with 108 victories, which is 22 more than the previous record. She's won every slalom but one this season. I think she's stronger than ever. She's only focusing on 2 events, slalom and giant slalom. She's somebody who thrives on training, having time to train. And by only focusing on 2 events and not putting Super G and downhill in there like she did in Beijing and Pyeongchang, she's going to have more time to train. I also think she's going to benefit from the fact that Lindsey Vonn has been taking a lot of the press. Michaela is a real introvert. She just likes to ski fast. She likes to think about skiing fast, what makes her go faster. Dealing with the press, she likes the press and she's really amenable to talking to us. But I think she would rather just, be quiet, be to herself, be with her good friends, be with her fiance, be with her mom and her brother. So I think with Lindsey taking a lot of the press, I think that actually might help Michaela, but I'm just speculating there.
Let's talk a little bit about her boyfriend, her fiance, who's Norwegian Alex Kilda, who had just a spectacular accident.
Horrific. I can't believe... I understand why they put the picture of his leg being filleted open on Instagram because people needed to understand it was more than just a cut. But he's really struggled to come back. He's been very dedicated. He didn't compete at Kitzbühel 2 weekends ago because of back pain. So I think he's really struggling in a number of parts of his body in trying to return from that crash. But hopefully we'll see him at the Olympics.
That's one of the things about this sport that is just so remarkable. When these skiers have a miscue, the margin of error is so little. I mean, he went flying into those nets. I mean, thank God they have these nets.
Thank God they have the nets, yes. And I think television doesn't do ski racing much of a service. It's great to be able to see them compete, but television flattens out the hill. It makes it look like, oh, I could ski that. In fact, I talked to Ryan Cochran-Siegel about that. I was writing a story about the Bormio, the Stelvio, the Bormio downhill, and how it's talked about as one of the most dangerous scary courses for the men on the World Cup circuit, and it's going to be the Olympic venue. But on television, it looks really flat. And he's like, yeah, it looks like, you're standing at the top of Cochran's, which we all know is it's a fun place to ski, but it's pretty flat. It's hard to tell how fast they're going in television. They're going 60, 80, 90 miles an hour. I mean, as fast as a Formula One car at times, and you just can't see that on TV.
Lindsey Vonn just had an accident. 41 years old, a remarkable comeback story. Talk a little bit about her.
Oh, that crash was awful to watch, and they played it over and over again in slow motion. Her comeback, I think a lot of people doubted her when she was coming back. You know, she, unlike Michaela Schifrin, she really does like being in the spotlight. And I think people thought perhaps that was why she was coming back. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized she just really loves skiing, and she had to end her career before she wanted to. And by having an artificial knee, you know, who's to say what you can and can't do on an artificial knee? Nobody's pushed the limits before, and Lindsay's doing that, and I applaud her for that. I think she's a hero for those of us who are getting older to show what you can still do. I think she was, you know, destined for a gold medal at these Olympics in one of three events, if not all three events. So it's just really sad that she crashed. In October, I was at a media event where she was talking, and somebody asked her if she was going to be strategic about what races she was going to do. Would she back out of a race if she thought it was dangerous? And in fact, she said yes. She would be strategic, that was the word she used, about the downhill in Cron, Montana, which was this past weekend where she crashed. Historically, it struggled with weather, snow conditions, and there have been a lot of injuries there. So when I saw her in training, her name in training, I was like, I wonder what's going on here. Not sure why she competed, but she's a competitor, and you can't keep a competitor out of the starting gate.
How long was she out of the sport?
Oh, gosh. She retired after World Championships in 2019, where she won a bronze medal. And she returned. She had the knee replacement in April 2024. So 5 years she was really out of the sport. And then she didn't make her announcement until November 2024. So almost 6 years.
And to be clear, the knee that she just recently injured was not the new knee.
Correct. But she has done damage to that left knee previously. And, you know, when you're 41, your knees don't, even when you haven't injured them, your knees don't act like they did in your 20s.
Talk about that. Is there any comparison that you can think of in sports? I mean, as she talks about, some of the people that she's competing against weren't even born when she first won her first World Cup races.
That's correct. And if you look across sport, I don't know how many, there are some athletes who've come back after joint replacements, but they're in different sports. And no sport is like ski racing with the G-forces that you feel at high speed and the G-forces you're putting on those joints. So what she's doing is really unprecedented.
I think of somebody like George Blanda, played football when he was 50 years old. You know, even Tom Brady was deep into his 40s. And I'm sort of thinking, you know, I'm not sure people realize just how impressive this is at the age of 41 to be doing, you know, what we've been talking about, which is this highly precision sport. A millimeter can be the difference between being in one of those nets or having the best race of your life. That's
true. And I think sports science has come a long way in the past 20, 25 years. Like, I can't imagine my parents doing any high-level sport in their 40s. You know, I was still trying to compete a little bit in bike racing in my late 30s, early 40s, and you still feel like you have some of what you used to have, but the amount of work you have to put into maintaining strength is a lot more than when you're in your teens and 20s.
You mentioned him earlier, Ryan Cochran-Siegel. The Cochran family is, as some people call, you know, royal family here in Vermont, certainly.
So of all the Vermont Olympians, or Olympians who Vermont is claiming, I think Ryan is the only born and bred Vermonter. Maybe Jack Young. I don't know where Jack Young, who's a cross-country skier, was born. But Ryan was born in Vermont, raised skiing at a Vermont ski area. You know, he's the second generation of the skiing Cochrans. Heard a funny story. He's told it many times, but when he was young, he was skiing at Cochran's, and he, you know, his cohort, his cousins, were all very good at slalom and giant slalom, which are considered the technical sports, the technical aspects of ski racing, where they're a little bit slower, a lot more turns. But Ryan just liked to point him straight and go fast. And he was a little kid, maybe 8 years old. And he went straight down Cochran's, and he got to the base, he kept going, he flew over a snowbank and smashed through the pane glass window.
Wow.
In the base lodge. And his uncle, who's a physician, Bob Cochran, watched it all and was kind of, the story I heard was, Bobby was sitting there like, how much do I need to intervene here? But Ryan, got up, shook himself off. Everything was okay, and he just kept skiing fast.
Wow. I mean, imagine the people that were drinking their hot cocoa in the cafeteria there. That's really so. I thought you were going to say he went out into the parking lot. Now, he had a really horrific accident, too. I mean, these, and I don't know how people, well, talk about his accident, because it was really bad.
So he crashed at kind of the granddaddy of all downhills, the Kitzbühel Hahnenkamm, which is, I've skied it. I skied it with COVID. It's a doozy. It's very narrow. It's very old school. There's some, the mouse fall is like 80%. It's all 80% grade. It's all ice. And he crashed right near the bottom in this big right footer turn, went into the nets. And, same thing, got up, kind of shook himself off, thought he was okay, but had in fact broken his neck. The fact that he came back from that and is now back on the podium. He finished on the podium at Crans-Montana in the men's downhill this past weekend. So he's had 2 downhill podiums this season. So he's an amazing story. And he, again, is an introvert. He's very quiet. He's very analytical, likes to talk about skiing, doesn't like to talk about himself. Just a super nice guy.
The story I read is that he was millimeters away from being paralyzed.
Probably, yeah.
A spinal break.
Just the way Michaela Schifrin last year when she crashed at Killington was millimeters away from having her colon impaled, which, I think it could have been a deadly injury. So it's just a scary reminder that these athletes, especially the skiers, are millimeters away from victory or disaster.
And it's about a minute and a half down the hill, but the adrenaline must be incredible.
Yeah, and Ryan talks a lot about focus and getting to that intense level where you can be completely focused on what you're doing, and that's what it takes to ski that fast and be safe.
I read a story about him too. You have to be focused, but you also have to just kind of somehow let it go, which was I had a little difficulty getting my head around that.
That's like walking one of those razor sharp ridges in the Himalayas where either side you're going to plunge 1,000 feet, and you just have to find that balance and stay on that ridge.
How do these skiers come back after one of these accidents and not be thinking about that every second of the whole time they're getting prepared or while you're skiing?
Good question. I mean, I know crashes stick with me. My husband had a bad accident 10 years ago, and that one still stuck with me. They rely a lot on sports psychologists. And I don't know what sports psychologists are telling them. Perhaps I should go see a sports psychologist, but focusing on what you can control and trying to block out the noise.
Ryan's comes from a family that includes Barbara Cochran. Can you enlighten people that are maybe not, or maybe a little younger than us, about who she is? So
Barbara Cochran is a member of the original generation of skiing Cochrans. She's one of 4 siblings who grew up skiing in Vermont, competing in the Olympics, and she won a gold medal in slalom at the 1972 Olympics, and it was the first medal for the U.S. in 20 years. Andrea Mead Lawrence in 1952 won 2 Olympic gold medals. Andrea Mead Lawrence grew up in Rutland, so Vermonters through and through. And since 1952, since Andrea Mead Lawrence's 2 Olympic gold medals, no American has won 2 Olympic gold medals in the same games.
Wow. That's pretty remarkable, isn't it? I mean, well, I guess the Europeans, this is just really the Norwegians, and this is just their wheelhouse.
It is. European systems, they have a lot more government support than the Americans do. They have a lot more community support, too. I know the Norwegians, they come up through clubs. Every town has a sports club with youth sports. And, you can Think of the things you can do when you're a kid and your friends are all doing the same thing. Like you're just racing to keep up with them. And we've got a little bit of that going on in Vermont. We've got, like Cochrane's has a really good youth ski program. My daughter came up through the Pico ski program. When you get a bunch of kids who are all loving what they're doing, playing outside in a sport, one or two of them is going to rise to the top. In fact, Bodie Miller, who was an Olympian back in the 2000s for the younger listeners, who won 6 Olympic gold medals, he was very good at tennis. And I watched him compete in an exhibition match against a former Australian Open winner at the Mount Washington Hotel. He and Johan Kriek played an exhibition set. And Bodie is an exceptional tennis player. And his family still owns a tennis camp in near Franconia, New Hampshire. So I asked Bodie afterwards, I was like, you were a tennis champion in Maine and you're an amazing tennis player. Why didn't you pursue that sport? There's a lot more money in it than ski racing. And he said, if I had grown up in Florida, I would have been a tennis player. But I grew up in Franconia, so my friends were skiers. We skied. That's what we did.
Now, my daughter went to a school where they brought them to Cochrane's I think it was Friday afternoon. And there's no gold or silver or bronze medals hanging around our house. So I'm going to have to make sure I tell her how disappointed I am in her.
No, but every person on a team plays a role. So if she had somebody coming up through the Cochrane program who's really good now, she played a role in getting that person there. Whether she brought cookies or she brought jokes or she brought a smile or she carried somebody's coats, she played a role.
Thank you. That was a great save for me. Can you describe, having now covered 8 Olympics?
8 Olympics.
How would you describe the difference between the skill level, the speed, the intensity of these downhill events?
You mean has it changed?
Yeah.
I don't think it's changed.
Really?
I don't think it's changed since the 30s. It's just they're competing on different equipment. We've been watching some old YouTube videos of ski races back in the 30s and 40s, and they are doing some crazy things on those old leather boots and straight wooden skis. So I think it was almost more dangerous back then, and they padded the courses instead of with fencing with hay bales that would freeze overnight, or with snow fencing, like wooden snow fences. So in some ways, it's safer now. They're going faster because the equipment allows them to go faster, but they have more safety equipment. Like the downhillers wear airbags that inflate automatically when they crash.
Oh, I didn't know that.
To protect their backs and necks. The helmets are certainly more protective, although the poor Norwegian who crashed in downhill right before Lindsey Vonn lost her helmet in the crash and suffered a concussion and a scraped up face. But yeah, the equipment is just better. I think they're skiing faster because of it. But I think the danger, it's still the same exhilarating danger that they had in the 30s and 40s.
It's really interesting you say that, because when I look back now at tennis players, you were just talking about Bodie Miller, when I look at tennis matches from the 70s or 80s, the pace of play is so much slower. I mean, a lot of them were playing with wooden rackets back then. But you look at a Chris Evert, Martina Navratilova match, and you think to yourself, wow, this is, they're just not hitting the ball that hard.
No, but I think if you gave them their 20-year-old body back and you gave them a modern racket and a few weeks to figure it out, they'd be right in there. I had the real pleasure of skiing with Andrea Mead Lawrence in 1997 at Pico Mountain, where she grew up. And it was a powder day, and she was in her 70s then, or late 60s. And I took a run with her, and she had a different relationship with gravity than I had. Even at that age, she seemed to be dancing down the slopes, like her feet weren't even touching the powder, where I was like, plowing through the powder like gravity had its, a fist grip on me. So I think if you'd given Andrea her 1952 body back and the modern equipment, she would be right up there with Michaela Schifrin and Lindsey Vonn.
What a great line! A different relationship with gravity. That could be the title of your next book.
That's a good idea.
Let's talk a little. Your real love, one of your real loves, is cross country skiing.
Yes, I love cross country skiing. Although I hated it as a kid. I liked downhill because it was easy and it was fun, and gravity pulled you downhill. And because I had a very strong relationship with gravity, it was pulling me downhill. Where cross-country skiing, you had to breathe hard. But then in my teens, I got into bike racing and realized cross-country skiing was a great method of cross-training. And you're out there in the woods by yourself. It's quiet.
Yeah.
It's kind of your happy place, especially this year. I have really gotten back into cross-country skiing. You're out in the woods. You have no cell phone coverage. You can't get pinged by Instagram. You can't log into the New York Times. You're just out there. The sun is out. The snow is gleaming. It's quiet.
Who are you watching in cross-country skiing?
So, well, Jessie Diggins, of course. I think she's going to go in. She's already won 3 Olympic medals. I think she's a favorite in any of the 6 women's races. I know she really wants to help the U.S. women win a relay medal, which is 4 women, each skiing 7.5 kilometers. So it would be great if she could help them, the U.S. team, win a medal in that. She and Julia Kern, who is a born and bred in Massachusetts, but trains with Stratton Mountain SMS T2 team. She and Jessie have won medals at World Championships in the team sprint in the past 2 World Championships. So they'll be a favorite in that. But I'm really looking at the men because the men have not won an Olympic medal since 1976, so 50 years. We've got Ben Ogden, who I want to say is a born and bred Vermonter. He's actually just a bred Vermonter. He was born across the river at Dartmouth. He and
wow, I guess you can't count that, right? Wow. Okay.
So funny story that Ben's sister Charlotte told me, and she said it was okay to tell the story. In 2000, before the 2022 Olympics, NBC researcher was talking to Ben to get his profile ready for the games, and said, "Well, you were born in Vermont, right?" And Ben said, "No, embarrassingly, New Hampshire." So
Ooh.
Ben's 2022 Olympic profile reads, "Birthplace, embarrassing, New Hampshire."
Oh, come on.
No, I have it. She sent me a screenshot of it. It's crazy. But no, he was born. My mother, who'd lived to be 100, loved to say she was a native Vermonter, but she was born at Mary Hitchcock Hospital. So we always teased her that she was not a native Vermonter.
Wow. Ouch.
Yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah. But anyway, Ben and perhaps Jack Young, who's also another Vermonter, was raised in Jay, Vermont. They might do well in the team sprint. Ben and Gus Schumacher, who's from Alaska, finished on the podium in the team sprint for the first time ever for the men a couple weekends ago. Jack Young is a great story, though. Hopefully he'll do well. He made a sprint final in December, and he was better known as a quarterback for the North Country Union High School team and a baseball outfielder.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is a multi-sport athlete right there.
Yeah. So I was looking forward to meeting him. I haven't met him yet, but
Okay. Let's talk about the coverage here. You mentioned social media. You and I were talking about this before we started, that there's a big focus these days on coverage through social media.
There is, and I think that's where most people are getting their news these days, unfortunately. I'm not going to this Olympics for the first time in 18 years. The website that I was working for, teamusa.com, is sending their social media teams instead. It's a very spread out games. The men are competing in Bormio, which is 5 hours away from the women competing in alpine skiing in Cortina. And then Milano was, another 3.5 hours south of both places. So it's difficult to send lots of people to cover these. You need lots of people, and it's expensive to send them. But it's going to be interesting to see what kind of stories come out of these games, because you can't really tell an in-depth story that I have seen on social media. So you will get little snippets on NBC's coverage, but it'll be interesting to see, whose stories get told and whose don't get told.
And then there's also the whole idea of experience too.
Experience for the
people
contributors,
the people covering it.
I mean, you look at the longtime Olympic writers. We've all been in there. We know who Bodie Miller was. We know who Barbara Ann Cochran was. And we know the significance of when an athlete does something or doesn't do something. We know the significance of it. Where my experience, and this is, I think it may be unfair to make generalizations, but a lot of the younger people are not doing the research. They're just coming in and sticking a microphone in front of an athlete's face and asking them a lighter and fluffier question like, what did you eat this morning? Or what's on your playlist? Which perhaps is interesting to some viewers, not so interesting to others.
That must be frustrating.
It is very frustrating. I feel like I've got a lot of stories left to tell and not a lot of avenues to tell them. So contemplating what my next move is there still a room for storytellers, or do I have to start learning this social media thing?
Well, what about doing a blog?
Yeah, perhaps. I've
Well, you got 3 days to make up your mind, so you better think about it.
And I've had my foot on the gas, and it's been hard to take a breath in the past 5 months to figure out what the next pivot is. I've been writing a fiction novel about the Olympics, but that is on the back burner, and if that ever comes to fruition, I will call you and tell you about it.
Well, and I should remind people, too, that you also wrote a book about Tropical Storm Irene, which is you and I actually, I think, initially met. Why did you write that book? Can you remind me?
Yeah, my sister works for the Wall Street Journal, and she was the bureau chief in Atlanta at the time. And Irene was supposed to be a southern storm, and it wasn't. It ended up kind of not doing a lot of damage in the south. And once it moved through New York City and hadn't done a lot of damage, my sister, it was Sunday, she kind of checked out for the day and went to a barbecue at the neighbors. And about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I started texting her. I was like, go on Facebook right now and check out the pictures I am sharing. Vermont is getting devastated by the storm. And she was like, yeah, whatever. She finally did. And she was like, oh my God, I have to get a reporter up there. And I'm like, too late. All the roads are washed out. So I got on my mountain bike and I rode up to Killington and Pittsfield to do reporting for her. And my only experience with natural disasters to that point had been watching Katrina coverage in 2005, where there were a lot of people sitting waiting for FEMA to show up, and nobody
on the roof of their house.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And nobody in Vermont was waiting for FEMA to show up. Anybody who had a backhoe and a tractor, they were out there. Craig Mosier was out there rebuilding Route 4. The guys up in Pittsfield were rebuilding the road, and I stopped and asked them, like, how are you getting paid for this? And we're like, that's not the point. The point is our town has been cut off, and we need to save our town. And I thought that was more than the interviews that I conducted were more than a couple articles in the Wall Street Journal. So that's where I pitched a book idea. And then I wrote another book in 2016. It came out in 2018 about the U.S. women's cross-country ski team. Kind of the same thing. The women started doing well. Like, the women had never been near the podium. Keegan Randall had won a couple world championship medals. But all of a sudden, the entire women's cross-country team was starting to get near or on the podium, not just Keegan. So I thought, like, oh, maybe they've discovered a new WCAX, maybe a new coach. What's going on? So everybody I interviewed said teamwork. And I was like, teamwork. Every women's team, sports team I've been on, we've been a bunch of nasty women, like tearing each other apart. Like, teamwork never did anything for me. So I wanted to explore that. And the more I talked to the coaches and the athletes, the more I realized there really was a story here. And it's the same thing. It's Keegan Randall might have been the one winning medals, but she was winning medals because the whole team that was building around her was helping her do that. There was somebody making it fun. There was somebody being team mom. And then those athletes started realizing they could keep up with Keegan in training. And if Keegan's winning medals, they can win medals too. And it was just this belief. And then Jessie Diggins came along, and she's been doing the same thing. And they realize, like, if this person's nice to me and helping me along and I can keep up with them in training, then I can win too. So I wrote a book about teamwork and how to build a team that is cohesive and raises everybody's level, where a rising tide raises all boats. It doesn't, it's not an imminent threat of drowning.
Okay, I'll bite. So what are some of the things that you found in that?
Getting to know your teammates and realizing that there might be somebody who has the talent of Jessie Diggins or the talent of Keegan Randall, but there's somebody else who's not quite there but could get there, but who is really a valued team member because of the cohesiveness they bring to the team, the fun they bring to the team. You get to know people for who they are, and you applaud them for their uniqueness. You don't tear them down because they're unique. And then you bring coaches in that value, get to know everybody as a human being and where they're at, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and you applaud them, and everybody feels good about who they are and their capability and their potential.
Kind of like my daughter bringing the chocolate chip cookies to Cochran. She can claim all the success of Ryan Cochran Siegel.
Right, and her cookies were an important part of that day or that season at the Cochran Ski Club. What she brought. If nobody was bringing cookies, if everybody was just bringing cookies for themselves, what fun is there in that?
Yeah, totally. And she better have left some at home so that we could sample them too.
I love cookies.
Yeah.
Can we talk about cookies?
Yeah, we could probably do a whole show about cookies.
I just had chocolate chip cookies at Blueberry Hill Cross Country Touring Center. Oh my gosh.
Talk about some of the are there other Vermonters we should know about?
Paula Moltzen. She grew up in Minnesota, but she went to UVM, and she now lives in Waitsfield, Vermont. She has been doing great things in alpine skiing the past few years. Been on the podium 9 times, 6 times in the past year. I think she will be one of the favorites in slalom or giant slalom. And interestingly, she's being sponsored by the Northeastern Fertility Clinic here in Burlington, and she's trying to bring awareness to women's fertility issues, which I applaud. We've got some other Vermonters. The biathlon team, a lot of them are from, grew up in out of state, but they either train at the Craftsbury Nordic Center as part of the Craftsbury Green Racing Project, or they're part of the Vermont National Guard and train in Jericho. And biathlon is the only winter sport that the U.S. has never won a medal in. And we have a couple of biathletes who could actually vie for a medal and break that drought. So, and we have a snowboarder, very young snowboarder, one of the youngest on the team, Jess Perlmutter. She's actually from New Jersey, but she goes to the Killington Mountain School. 16 years old, and she'll be doing big air and slope style.
Wow.
And I don't think we'll see her on the podium, but she'll get some Olympic experience, and she's a name to keep our eye on for perhaps 2030 or 2034 Olympics.
It's fascinating. I've been watching a little bit about the World Cup skiing, and there really is this premium put on getting on the podium, first, second, or third. And, I sometimes get the feeling that it's okay if you don't win, but the podium is really the premium.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people complain about that, and you should be applauded just for getting to the Olympics. They are applauded just for getting to the Olympics. Yeah, is it just an American focus on the reward rather than the journey? I don't know. I personally want to see the American who has bib 44 who might finish 43rd, but I want to see them ski or compete in, whatever sport they're competing in. But yeah, we do tend to put a focus on first, second, and third.
Yeah, but I guess what I was saying is that I was surprised to hear how many of them are satisfied with second and third, and that it isn't all just about being first.
It isn't. The happiest athletes are the ones who win gold or bronze. Silver medalists are typically unhappy because they're runner-up. They just missed the gold medal. And bronze medalists are happy because they didn't finish fourth and they made the podium.
Right.
So I think second and fourth are the worst places to finish. But, it is a little token. It's a little prize to take home that shows that you did work hard. Did you work any harder than the person who finished fifth? Maybe, maybe not. But a lot of the Olympics, any one of the top 10 could win. It's just, did the wind go their way that day? Who knows?
Well, and the margins of victory are just, it's a hundredth of a second over a course where you're basically, in my view, just trying to stay alive. And, you're cutting these gates. And, to lose by a hundredth of a second, how you couldn't replay that in your mind 1,000 times would be, I couldn't do it.
I had a philosophy professor who said, we do the best we can given the circumstances. And hopefully the athletes remember that, who win or lose by a hundredth of a second.
How have the games changed, in your view, in the 8 since you started covering this?
Oh, gosh. Well, certainly the opening and closing ceremonies have changed. My first games, 2010, opening ceremonies were just something to behold. Magnificent performances, bigger than life props coming out. Now, and we really saw this in the Paris Games, they're made for TV. I spent the Paris Games I had a ticket to the opening ceremonies. I sat in a puddle watching the opening ceremonies on a Jumbotron with water leaking into my computer. I finally said, this is ridiculous, and I went inside and watched the opening ceremonies on a Jumbotron with dry pants. So the games are much more made for TV than they used to be. Athletes are now trying to tell their own stories on Instagram. The media gets a lot of, we'll reach out to an athlete to request an interview, which in the old days press officers would bend over backwards. And now a lot of the time we'd like to decline this opportunity. Either they don't think your story is going to give them enough press, or they're not interested in the angle, or they're just simply going to tell that story. You suggest a story to them, and then suddenly they're telling it on Instagram. So we're feeding them their ideas, and then they're trying to tell their own stories. But we're not seeing the full story. We're seeing the curated version of what they want to tell us. We're not getting any input from mom. We're not getting any input from the childhood coach. We're not getting any input from fellow competitors. So that seems to be the way things are going right now. I think there will be I don't want to say reckoning, but I think there'll be a change of course at some point, but I don't think any of us know what that new course will be.
I can't remember what the title was of the segments that they used to do in the past, where they would kind of go the story behind the story of an athlete and kind of go in depth on them. And they were really just so interesting to see, the Franz Klammer, where he went to elementary school, who his parents were, who Bodie Miller, all of those were just, they were as interesting as the competition sometimes. It's too bad.
I think we'll still see those on TV. I think NBC is still doing those, and maybe that's where we're going to have all the stories told. But I don't see a lot of stories coming out of long-form journalism anymore. I know the major outlets, New York Times, Wall Street Journal is sending full teams, but the Washington Post last week pulled everybody, even though the $8,000 in hotels was already paid for. They said nobody was going to go, and now they're sending 4 reporters to, I don't know what 4 reporters are going to cover in Italy with venues spread out so far. But
what was the reasoning on that? What do you
don't know? Probably cost.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. What do you know about this area, where the games are actually being held?
Well, they're in northern Italy. I've never been to Milan. That's where ice hockey and figure skating is going to be held. Then the snow sports are going to be held up in the Dolomites and the Italian Alps. Bormio is kind of central northern Italy. Cortina's over on the eastern side in the Dolomites. Stunning areas. A lot of the athletes are thrilled to be competing at venues that are considered typical winter sport venues. The last 3 Olympics, Beijing, Pyeongchang, and Sochi, have been at venues where nobody had skied before. So, like Lindsey Vonn has skied. Hopefully she'll be able to compete in the downhill. She has skied, the course is called the Tofane, the Olympia del Tofane, 65 times.
Wow.
And, Schifrin has probably skied it, not that many, but maybe 40 times. And they know the terrain. They know what the snow is like. Like the snow in Pyeongchang and, in Asia is completely different. You get the winds blowing down from Siberia. I grew up in the Northeast Kingdom, and Pyeongchang and Beijing are the coldest places I have ever been. You're standing there and you feel like your skin is being desiccated and frozen, like freeze-dried all at once. And that snow texture is so different to ski on than what they're used to skiing on in Europe. So they're going to be at venues where they know the snow, they know the terrain, they know the food, they know the alphabet. They can get good coffee. They know, and they know how to get on Wi-Fi. It's like these things sound stupid, but they start mounting, and the more stress you pile onto an athlete, if you're worried about competing near North Korea, if you're worried about COVID, if you're worried about Putin invading Crimea, if you're worried about getting some, intestinal disease from the water, it just compounds the stress and the anxiety you're already feeling, and it sucks your energy away.
How do you feel about the Russians not competing, not being allowed to compete?
Amen. And I have a hard time with the Russians who compete under the Olympic flag. I can't remember what they're called. They have another name, but I am vehemently opposed to doping. When I was competing in cycling, I was competing against people who were doping, and it's just not fair.
And is that the reason? It's not political?
Well, now that you mention that, yeah, part of it is political.
I would imagine some of these Russian athletes are saying, that doesn't seem necessarily fair.
Right, and I think those are the athletes who are saying, well, I wasn't part of this systemic doping problem in 2014. And I don't know all the ins and outs of that. When I was writing for Team USA, we only covered the good news, and we didn't cover doping. So I've never done much investigative journalism into that. So I think we've leveling the playing field with what the World Anti-Doping Agency is doing and what USADA, the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, is doing is very good work, and I hope they keep it up. I know there are still people out there who are doping. So,
in the past, the Olympics was all amateurs. That's not really the case now, right?
Yeah, even when it was all amateurs, you've got countries that are supporting their athletes.
That's fair.
They're in the military. Like a lot of the Swiss biathletes were in the military. Well, they're getting military salaries for training to compete. So what is the line between amateur and pro?
Well, now this is the first year since 2014 that NHL professional hockey players are going to be on the hockey team, which, I don't know. I mean, I guess those are the best of the best, but, you and I are old enough to remember the Miracle on Ice, and there was just something beautiful about a bunch of kids who were amateurs beating this really professional Russian team.
And a lot of that Miracle on Ice story was how Herb Brooks, the coach, brought those college students together who were used to competing against each other and made them one team. So with these NHL players, are they going to cohese as one team? I mean, they're used to playing for their team, not for the USA. It'll be interesting. I don't follow hockey that much. I never did. We had more hockey-specific writers. But I didn't realize that the U.S. men have not won a gold medal since 1980, since the Miracle on Ice team. So I think it'll be an interesting tournament to watch.
Well, maybe they need to read your book on teamwork.
I'd be more than happy to sell them copies. They can get them on Amazon.
I really hope you find a way or willing to take on the idea of doing something during these Olympics. I think you have so much to offer on this.
Thank you. I'd like to. The first weekend, I am going backcountry skiing in Quebec. I will not have cell service. I will not have Wi-Fi. I will not have any internet. So for 3 days, I'm going to be in the backwoods of Quebec, hopefully staying warm and not paying attention to the Olympics. But I don't know. I love the Olympics ever since I was a little kid growing up in the Northeast Kingdom. And I remember telling my parents that I wanted to go to the Olympics and I was going to go in skiing, figure skating, or swimming. And if I couldn't qualify in that, I was going to go in something easy like track and field because I figured anybody could run. But I was actually, in fact, a terrible runner. So the fact that I got into the Olympics by writing is, I don't know. I guess you never give up on your dream, but your dream might be a little different than you think it is.
That wraps it up for this edition of 802 News, sponsored by Red Hen Cafe and Bakery. Thanks to Peggy McKay Shin, and thank you for listening.